Good morning, Ethos Church, and thank you for joining us both in person and online. If you're new with us today, we want you to feel at home and know that this is a safe place. We're so glad to have you here. For us, church is so much more than just a Sunday service, and we want you to know that there's a perfect place for you at Ethos. One of the best ways you can get connected with us is to fill out a connection card. Grab your phones and follow the instructions on the screen for a digital version, or on your way out today, you can fill out a card at the In This Together table. Whichever option you choose, be sure to still stop by the table after the worship experience so we can meet you and get a gift into your hands. And it gets better. When you fill out that card, we're going to give generously on your behalf to Out of Darkness. It's a local organization whose mission we love and believe in, fighting human trafficking right here in our city. If you're curious about ways you can practice generosity today, there are several different ways you can do that. You have options available to you like text to give, Venmo, online giving, or at the drop box in the foyer on your way out today. If you're new with us, again, please do not feel any obligation to give whatsoever. We're just so glad that you're here with us. All we want for you is to experience the best of Ethos for who we are and learn more about us as a church. Well, as the new year kicks off, we are so excited for Ethos Youth to gather back together again. Ethos Youth is a space for our middle school and high school students to come together in healthy community, to have some fun, and to discover more of God's love for them. Ethos Youth meets on the first 3 Tuesdays of each month at 7 p.m. and will begin meeting again January 10th at 7 p.m. Parents, you can text the information on the screen to stay up to date on all the details. Well, a few weeks ago, we shared with you our changes to Ethos 101, now becoming Ethos 101 to 301. After you complete 101 and 201 at your own pace online, Ethos 301 will be held in person to help you conclude the process and to help you get fully plugged in and serving with us. Our next Ethos 301 will be held next Sunday, January 15th during the 11 a.m. worship experience. You can check out more details online at ethosoh.com/101. Well, we ended an amazing group season this past fall where we heard so many stories and saw so much community and friendships being built. We're gearing up to prepare yet another launch for our spring group season very soon, but first, we're hosting a few interest meetings. If you've been wondering what it's like to lead a small group or been on the fence about jumping into leadership role, then we want to help you. You can check out our small group interest meetings on January 15th and 22nd following both worship experiences, where you're going to be able to meet our small groups director and learn a little bit more about leading a group in this next season. Another interest meeting that's happening soon is our mission trip interest meeting. Well, we've had the privilege of sending teams from Ethos to El Salvador on mission trips for the past 2 years, and we're gearing up for another trip to El Salvador this summer. We would love for you to experience one of these trips, so we will be holding an interest meeting on January 15th following both worship experiences to share more about our heart for missions as well as the impact you can have on El Salvador. If you feel led to be a part of this, or you're just curious and have questions, be sure to join us then.
Hey Ethos, Vinny here with another building update for you. All of our windows have arrived and are currently installed. The mechanical, electrical, and plumbing are underway with partial rough-in approval. We have our installation here, so it's ready to install once we have those final approvals. And the board and batten siding is currently being installed. Ethos, thank you so much for your generosity, for your prayer, for building a bigger table together.
Come on, let's give it up for Hard Hat Vinny, everybody. Hard Hat Vinny always pleases the crowd. Well, as you can tell, things are really coming along. If you had the chance to see the property off of Africa Road, even just from the road, there's been just massive improvement and progress being made. And so we should hopefully this week possibly have a kind of move-in date. And so hopefully we can share that with you here pretty soon. We're hoping to find that out tomorrow, in fact. And so just continue to pray for that whole process and no more delays. We had a few delays, but hopefully there'll be no more delays moving forward. Well, thanks for being here today. The first Sunday that we get to gather together here at Ethos. If you're a little bit newer to this space, maybe it's your very first time checking us out this weekend, we are so thrilled that you're here. We really are. And I know that it can be often intimidating to come into a brand new church environment. probably more than any other environment, church might be the most awkward to walk into the very first time. And so thanks for just having the courage to come and hang with us this weekend. If we can serve you in any capacity at all, whether it's your first time or your 100th time, we're here for it. Let us know. Whether you're in the room or you're watching online, go to the very bottom of our homepage, click the Ethos Care button, and we'd love to follow up with you and see how we can make a practical difference in your life. Well, this weekend, in fact, today, begins a brand new series that will take us for the next 3 weeks. It's sort of a short series that will really coincide with the teaching series coming up in February as well, which I'll mention here in just a moment. But I want to talk today and over the next couple weeks about habits, a long obedience in the same direction. And running parallel with this series, something that we do every single year, is our 21 days of prayer and fasting. And as you walked in here this morning, you received one of these prayer cards. If you're a parent, your kids will receive a card as well that's written a little bit more on their grade level. In addition, parents, be sure to grab the prayer booklets for your kids as well. It's a little booklet that we've created to help your kids kind of journey in this prayer on their grade level as well. Those are available for you when you pick up your kiddos, I believe. Is that correct, Maddie? They'll be over there. And so grab one of those. But also, I just want to encourage us, all of us, and invite us into this journey over the next 21 days to pray. Every single day. If you miss a day, don't sweat it. Just jump back in the next day. But as we agree together, we're believing as we separate ourselves at the top of this year, we do this every single year. It's a habit of our church. As we separate ourselves, that God will make up the distance between the gap of what we can do and what only God can do. That happens through prayer. And God can do some incredible things in a really short amount of time, but God also generally moves through a long obedience in the same direction. That's why every single year we kick off the year with 21 days of prayer and fasting. In fact, if you've never fasted before, maybe that's a brand new concept to you. Fasting is simply the removal of something that you traditionally do more times than not every single day. It could be social media. It could be watching a television show before you go to bed. It could be a meal or a couple meals throughout the day. But fasting is simply the removal of that thing to create some margin in your life so that you can replace that thing with prayer. And as we do that, our hunger for God begins to increase. It really does. And so I would even invite you to consider fasting and just considering even today what you would want to begin fasting starting tomorrow. 21 days of prayer begins tomorrow. And then in addition, lastly, you received one of these Bible reading plans when you walked in today as well. This is something that we're kicking off this year. We've created a specific Bible reading plan just for us. It's sort of a unique way to read through the New Testament, just the newer portion of our Bible alone, throughout the course of the entire year. And we're reading it a little bit out of order, and that is okay. I had somebody ask me recently if it's a sin to read your Bible out of order. It is not a sin to read your Bible in a different order. In fact, we've intentionally created a Bible reading plan that will help us to better understand the New Testament as we read this through together. And so just pick up one of these plans. If you didn't receive when you walked in, pick one up at the In This Together table, and let's go through this year reading our New Testament together. And again, if you miss a day, don't sweat it. Just jump back in. If it takes you longer than a year to read through the New Testament, that is okay. Turn to the person next to you and say, that's okay. That's okay. Just release them from the shame right now. Actually, can you turn to the person next to you one more time this morning and let them know at the top of the year, I'm so glad that I'm in church with you today. Can you let them know? Come on, Mr. Kiger. I know you want to suck up to your wife right now. Well, I want to share this morning as we kind of give more of like an overview and an introduction to this series. I want to share this morning from a message entitled The Habit of Becoming. And if you're looking for a longer title, and you're taking notes, no one's ever asked me for a longer title before, but just pretend that you did. We're going to call this The Habit of Becoming More Like Jesus. And we're going to barely scratch the surface of what we could talk about this morning as it relates to this teaching title. But I want to just dive in a bit and identify some really important habits, or even more so, things that tend to hinder us from leaning into and honestly just becoming more like Jesus. Rick Warren, he once said that if you try to scare people into following Christ's example, it's not going to work for too long. The only way you get people to take responsibility for their spiritual maturity is to teach them habits of faith. Once that happens, they become self-feeders. People follow Christ not because you've led them there, but because it's who they are. It's the habit of their life. It's a lifestyle, a way in which they live. Growing up, my grandparents on my dad's side, they would spend every winter in Florida, which always seems like a really good idea this time of the year, does it not? And so every year, my dad would load us up in the van or the SUV, and all of us kids would journey down to Florida to visit with my grandparents for a week every March. And it was like one of the highlights of our year. And this particular year, I was in 3rd grade, and we're getting ready to leave. We're getting ready for the journey home, the long 16-hour drive back to southeastern Pennsylvania, where I grew up, born and raised, West Philadelphia, spent all of my days chilling out, maxing, relaxing on. When I was a youth pastor, that went over. People loved it. They loved it. Anyway, and so I'm getting ready to journey back home. And my dad said, "Hey guys, we're going to leave in about an hour. We're gonna pack up and leave in about 1 hour." And I asked my dad. I said, "Dad, is that enough time for me to take my bike down to the candy store and use the remaining $1.75 I have from my vacation fund for some road trip goods, some candy?" And he's like, "Absolutely, son. Go for it." So I hop on my bike, and it's about a half a mile down from my grandparents' house. And there's 2 stop signs that I got to get through in order to make it to the candy store. And as I'm coming up on the second stop sign, I need to take a pretty sharp right turn. And I decided, I think I can pedal really fast and not stop and make it through this sign and do some cool BMX, slide my back tire out. The people are gonna love it. The people are gonna love it. There's nobody around. And so I do it, and my bike gives out on me because there's some gravel on the side of this neighborhood road, and I slide across the street, and I literally ripped up my right forearm all the way down the right side of my back. I still to this day have a scar on my right forearm the size of my fist, reminding me of that accident, reminding me to slow down. In fact, one of the funnier parts of that story was, true story, there was an older gentleman who was riding his bike down the street at that time, and he just kept riding the whole time, slowly staring at me like, "What did you do?" Note to self, don't be that guy. He never offered to help. And much like you, if there's anything I want to do, I want to do it fast. I enjoy listening to podcasts. I know many of you do as well. And I listen to all of my podcasts on 1.5 speed. I have a membership to studyleadership.com where it gives me 30-page abridgments of just about every leadership book available to us, because I want the content, but I want to consume it as quickly as humanly possible. In the words of the 21st century great philosopher Ricky Bobby, I want to go fast, and it's up here somewhere. I want to go really fast. I was telling some people earlier, I said I realized when I put that in my notes that I have now quoted Ricky Bobby the last 3 weekends that Ethos has been gathering together. It's in the last 5 weeks. True story, I actually put it in my notes, and I thought to myself, should I not do this? Should I stop talking about Ricky Bobby? Because it's if you don't know who Ricky Bobby is, you're a better Christian than the rest of us. That's a true story, but we all just sort of want to go fast. Did you know that 92% of New Year's resolutions are given up on, throw in the towel before we even get to Valentine's Day? And the reason why people give is because they say, I didn't see the results as fast as I had hoped to. And I want to take some time this morning over the next few weeks together to just slow down. And rather than identifying how we can achieve our goals for 2023 and achieve them quickly, I want us to ask, how do we create healthy habits? Because science will tell us, as we'll dig into a bit more next week, that the reason why most of our goals fail is because we don't spend time identifying the habits needed to achieve the goals. And habits are better than goals. Now, this is overly simplistic, but think about habits a bit like a vehicle and a goal like the destination. You can have the greatest destination that you hope to get to, but if you don't have a vehicle to take you there, you're never going to arrive. You're never going to experience the proverbial success that you're trying to pursue. And in this series, I want to take some time and identify the spiritual habits that help us most. In fact, we're not going to get really specific about some spiritual habits, but I want to identify how. How do we begin to implement some things in our lives that will actually help us in this long obedience of following Jesus throughout the course of our lives? You probably noticed this. I know that I have. That it's actually kind of easy to get people interested in the message of the gospel. But it's really difficult to sustain the interest. Next week and the week after, we're going to get really practical. We're going to talk about how to start good habits and actually how to stop bad ones. We're going to look at kind of the science and the psychology behind habits and talk about the biblical principles that the scriptures have been talking about for centuries before science caught up as it relates to habits. In February, then, this series is going to lead us right into a 4-week collection of teachings on our thought life and how do we win the war in our mind, which is really part B of what we're talking about over the next 3 weeks together. I was originally planning on doing both these series together, but it felt right to separate them. But I share that with you because even the way in which we think about stuff is a result of the habits that we've implemented, whether we realize it or not, in our lives. See, millions of people make decisions for Christ, but unfortunately, there is a dreadful attrition rate. Millions of people say, yeah, I'll sign up for that. But not the same amount of people continue on that long obedience in the same direction of following Jesus. Eugene Peterson said that many claim to have been born again, but the evidence of mature Christian discipleship is slim. And just to be quite honest, I don't even have to look outside of the mirror of my own life to realize that that is unfortunately often true even in my own life. There's a large market. There's a great market for religious experience. Religious experience being like, we can pack out venues for conferences to sign up to hear some of the greatest Christian speakers and preachers and teachers of our day. We can pack out stadiums to experience a next level worship concert. Like, we love those things and we can sell out tickets for them. There's nothing wrong with those things. Like, I'm an advocate for many of those things. However, I've also discovered, though, that there's little enthusiasm, not a whole lot of excitement for what I think is even better, which is the patient acquisition of slowly over time maturing our Christian character. Have you noticed that there's little inclination, kind of small propensity to sign up for what the ancients would call a long apprenticeship? What earlier generations of Christians called sanctification. Sanctification is an unbelievably churchy word. One that if you're new to church in here, you're like, what does that mean? And for good reason. Like, the churchy definition of sanctification is this. It's God's progressively, meaning it happens over a long period of time, separating a believer from sin to himself and transforming his total life experience toward holiness and purity. Now, let's break that down just a bit. The Apostle Paul says it like this in Romans chapter 8, that God knew his people in advance. He knew you and I before we ever said yes to him. Of course, we understand he knew us. Even if you don't believe in God, at least you can understand that if you did, God knows everything about you. And he chose them, and here it is. Paul says, and he chose us, chose you. For what? Not just to say yes to Jesus, but to become like Jesus. In fact, sanctification, simply put, is the process of becoming like Jesus. Which, church, this isn't always fun to preach, and it certainly doesn't fill out stadiums. But that is a long obedience in the same direction. A long obedience of healthy habits. It doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen automatically. And so I want to talk, just kind of giving three brief points that I think will resonate with you. And I think you'll see yourself in some of these. Hopefully you don't think about the person next to you, but you just look into the kind of the proverbial mirror of your own life. And I want to give us 3 quick things as it relates to what stands in our way of becoming like Jesus. Now, if you're not a Jesus follower, and you're like, man, I'm kind of skeptical about this whole church thing, about this whole God thing, that is okay. We're so glad that you're here. And we really believe that you can belong here in community, in relationship, regardless of what you believe about Jesus. In fact, you could literally just kind of change the title here. What stands in our way of building habits? And these 3 points will still apply to your life. But for those of us who say, man, I really want to honor God with my life. I want to follow Jesus. Well, in that case, we want to say what stands in our way of us becoming more and more like him. I think the first one is we want shortcuts. Like, it's the reason why I went as fast as I could around that stop sign and ended up getting burned in the process. Like, we just don't see our goals achieved as fast as we would hope to as fast as we'd hope to achieve them. We don't see progress in the time frame that we desired. As a result, we throw in the towel. You have a New Year's resolution of losing 10 pounds, and so January 1st, man, you jump on that treadmill and you run on it for a solid 4.5 minutes. And then you jump off onto the scale and nothing changed. You're like, man, what good is this? You have a goal of getting out of debt. And so for an entire month of January, you decide, I'm going to give up coffee, or at least purchasing coffee from the local coffee house. I'm going to make coffee at home. Anyway, but I'm trying to do that right now. We bought an espresso machine for Christmas, and just side note, we're like, this isn't very good. Like, we're just struggling with it at the moment. But anyway, moving on. And at the end of the month, you realize, I've saved $100. And now your student loan debt isn't $35,000, it's $34,900. You're like, I barely made a dent. You take your wife out on a date. The next day, you still get into a fight. You prayed for 3 days in a row, but you don't see any significant, noticeable changes. And as a result, you and I, we all do this. We wrongly conclude that small, good decisions, they don't matter that much. Or you play video games for 3 straight hours, and your wife's not happy, but she doesn't leave you. You demean your husband over and over, and you don't have a good relationship, but he doesn't leave you. You skip church for a month, maybe 2 months, and the world doesn't cave in on you. You eat a third of the box of chocolates all in one sitting, or if you're like me, a third of the little Reese peanut butter cups that are shaped like a Christmas tree, all in one sitting. And at the end of it, you have no major health problems. And as a result, you and I wrongly conclude that small, bad decisions don't matter that much. But intuitively, you know this. This is just a reminder of a truth that we all inherently understand, which is that our lives are all sum totals of the small decisions that we make. Nobody is exempt from that reality. The accumulation of debt didn't happen overnight. The affair didn't happen overnight. Falling out of love with your spouse didn't happen overnight. Likewise, success doesn't happen overnight. Nobody is an overnight success story. You talk to somebody who you think is successful, and they'll tell you there was years, if not decades, of preparation and a long obedience in the same direction. Likewise, you and I, we aren't sanctified. We don't become like Christ overnight. It's the reason why we're engaging every single year in 21 days of prayer and fasting, every single year. And listen, I have yet, and I believe that God can, but I have yet seen God radically change something after 21 days. However, over the course of several years, I've now been kicking off every single year with 21 days of prayer and fasting for the last 12 years. This is my 12th year in a row. If I look back 12 years ago, I can see significant change and can only be accredited to the fact of a long obedience in the same direction. Likewise, I've never read my Bible for 1 week. And at the end of that week, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know everything about the Lord. But I've now been reading my Bible for 20 consecutive years. Not every day, I've missed several days. But for the most part, I've maintained this long obedience in the same direction. And nobody could convince me otherwise of what I believe and am so convicted about as it relates to the Scriptures and who Jesus really is. It's a long obedience in the same direction. The author of Hebrews says it like this. This is so interesting to me. They write, let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us, the race just simply being life. And we do this. We run the race of life with endurance by keeping our eyes on Jesus, who's the champion, who initiates. He starts your faith and he perfects your faith. It's not actually your discipline or your willpower. It's a result of us just continually coming back to, pointing ourselves back to, living in all of, leaning into more and more of Jesus. Now, here's what's so interesting, though, and here's what I think is so critically important that we lean into and understand both today and really for the entirety of our lives. There are a myriad of words, verbs, adjectives, whatever. I'm not real good with English, so I don't know. What is endurance? Is that a verb? It doesn't matter. Why do I care? I don't, but for some reason it came to my mind right there. What is it? Now I'm really curious. It's an adverb. It's an adjective and a verb combined. Not good English, okay? True story, 11th grade, junior year, I failed my English class. I speak, like I should be able to not fail. Anyway, he says, let us run with endurance. There's so many different words that the author could have said there. Let's run with love. Let's run with mercy. Let's run with grace. But endurance, in fact, depending on what translation you have a 50-50 chance of that word either being endurance or perseverance. They're the same English word translated from the same Greek word, rather, translated into English. Endurance and perseverance, those are not sexy terms as it relates to a long obedience of following Jesus over the course of the entirety of our lives. Like, we don't want, like, endurance? I don't want to talk about endurance. When I watch the Olympics, I'm not watching the endurance races. I'm watching, like, the 100-meter dash. Like, I want the world's fastest man and woman. I want to watch that. Like, that's what I want to watch, right? All people, women and children, like all, man, what am I doing right now? Okay. Back at it, Jordan, back at it. It's my first weekend back. First service was a little bit awkward at times. Second service, no different. Anyway, here we go. The point is that this word endurance is a critical word. In fact, I would argue that endurance, as it relates to our Christian faith, is the single most underrated description of what is required when we sign up to follow Jesus. You and I need endurance. What do we need endurance for? We need endurance to forgive again, to repent again, to get back up again. Listen, I don't need endurance to forgive. I need endurance to forgive again. I don't need endurance to start. I need endurance to start over again. I've seen so many people, I've seen this even in my own life. How many times at the beginning of pretty much every year, it feels like there's a sense of apathy within some people. There's sort of this lethargic mentality that happens because we're a little discouraged, because we didn't achieve what we had hoped to achieve or seen happen what we had hoped to see happen in the previous year. And so the thought of embarking on a new year feels a bit overwhelming to so many of us. And it's because we have little endurance to get back in the game again. I've seen so many people make decisions to follow Jesus, and after some hardship, they fall away, or they kind of throw in the towel, or at least partially begin to kind of water down some of their convictions. There's no perseverance. There's no endurance. I think more than anything else, what we need today is this long obedience of endurance in the same direction. Now catch this though, because when the author of Hebrews writes this, it's so interesting. They say, let us run with endurance, the race that God has set before us, not just individually, but corporately. And we together do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus. Nowhere in the scriptures will you ever find anything that teaches us about a personal relationship with God. Not that you aren't to have a personal relationship with Him, because it is personal. It's a personal decision that you make to follow Him, to trust in Him, to believe in Him. It's personal to you. However, all throughout the scriptures, it's not a personal relationship that the authors of the Bible teach us. It's a corporate, communal, committed relationship that He teaches us. Because hear me, I think the second thing that causes us so often to stand in our way of becoming more like Jesus is we don't fully commit to one another. Duke University did a study back in 2018, I believe it was, where they identified that the number one thing that causes us to develop good habits, we'll talk more about this next week, the number one thing is just simply being in proximity to other people who have the habits that we hope for. The study went on to survey and to reveal that anybody who was setting out to be a runner said if they didn't surround themselves with other runners, they were 92% less likely to actually stay committed to running. But that's true in every area of our lives. In fact, the Apostle Paul says it like this in Galatians chapter 6. He says, share each other's burdens, and in this way you obey the law of Christ. The law of Christ is John 13, 34 and 35. It's Jesus telling us, hey guys, I'm going to give you a new commandment. I want you to love one another as I have loved you. And by this type of love, the world will know that you're my disciples. In fact, side note, that is the number one reason why people are not attracted to Christianity, because we have not apprenticed ourselves to learning how to love like Jesus. And as a result, people are like, I don't think that's Jesus. And the world only knows who Jesus is because we are his body and we reveal him. We need to take personal responsibility for that as well. But Paul tells us, he says, the way that you love people like Jesus, whether you fulfill this law, one of the ways at the very least is to share each other's burdens. If you think you're too important to help someone, you're just fooling yourself, Paul says. If you think you're beyond serving other people, if you think you're beyond giving generously to those in need, if you think you're beyond and have aged out of doing what previously you were passionate about doing, but now you think that's for the next generation, Paul says you're fooling yourself. He's like, you're not that important. In first service, I shared, wasn't anticipating to do so, but there was a story that came to my mind. I'll share it briefly with you. But 3 years ago, I went on this trip with some friends of mine, some other pastors across the states, and we were on this pontoon boat in this big ravine, and there was these like 1,000-foot cliffs all around us. It was a beautiful scene. I mean, just unbelievably gorgeous. I had never seen anything just quite so picturesque, like straight out of National Geographic. This was in Montana. It was just unbelievable. And at the end of the night, we gathered together on this table, and it's sort of like a debrief time, and everybody's saying, man, throughout this week, what do y'all just feel like the Lord's been saying to you? And everybody's going around the table, and I'm like, I don't feel like I got anything. You ever been in those environments, like in a small group, and you're like, pass. And it just hit me. I was like, this isn't really encouraging, but this is what I feel like has been revealed to me this week. I was in that ravine today, and I was looking around. I was like, man, I am really small and unbelievably insignificant in the grand scheme of everything that the Lord is doing in this world. And it felt really good to feel that small and to remember that God is so big. I think for some of us, we just need to begin this new year with this. Maybe you came this morning or you're watching online, and what you needed today wasn't anything else that was said or sung or experienced, but you needed just to remember to just breathe. And that everything you're setting out to accomplish this year and everything that you wish you had accomplished last year that you're carrying into and kind of shamefully hoping to experience this year, that the Lord is just reminding you to just breathe. As if God is saying, I'm so much bigger than the thing that you feel like only you can do. Paul says, you're not as important as we think that we often are. He goes on, he says, so let's not get tired though. So let's not get tired of doing what's good. At just the right time, look at the plurality of what Paul is saying here. We. It's all communal. We will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. There's endurance again. If we stay in it, if we persevere. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially those who are of the family of faith. David Brooks, in his book, The Second Mountain, fantastic book, he writes of hyper-individualism, which we spoke of briefly in our post-Christianity series a few months ago. He says it's the reigning ethos of our day. That's really the only reason I wanted to share this quote, but no, just kidding. He says it's a system of morals, feelings, ideas, and practices based on the idea that the journey through life is an individual journey, that the goals of life are individual happiness, authenticity, self-actualization, and self-sufficiency. Hyper-individualism puts the same question on everybody's lips. What can I do to make myself happy? And yet we know that when you lean into, we taught this several weeks ago, when you lean into just identifying how can I be happy, you actually find yourself in even greater bondage. In pursuit of personal freedom, we find ourselves in even more captivity. We already discussed that, so I won't go down that pathway, but as Jesus followers, the better question is not what can I do to make myself happy, but hear me. Holy Spirit, help us get this. Who am I committing to because Jesus has committed to me? I mean, Jesus is radically committed to you. Like, he'll never leave you. He never forgets about you. Like, even your grandmama forgets about you every once in a while, but not Jesus. He's radically committed, unequivocally committed to you. And so he's asking us, who are you committed to? In an effort to become more and more like him. During the COVID season in 2020, when we couldn't gather together in close physical proximity, at first it felt like, okay, maybe this is like a new way of doing church. In fact, there was so much talk about that sort of within the church world. And over time, I was just kind of reflect, like, Lord, what are you doing during this season? There were so many things that I just felt even like convicted of or just more inspired by. But one of the things that I realized in that season, more than any other season, at least in the time that I've been a pastor, is simply this, that the best way I can know and love you and the best way that you can know and love me is if we're present when we gather. Not pursuing individualism, but rather committed community with one another. You've seen this. Hear me. When people leave Ethos or any church, it doesn't bother me per se that they left our specific church, the community that God has called us to, the portion of the local body that God has called us to be a part of. That doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. Like, I'm past like the ego side of that. What I get concerned with, and you've seen this, and I've seen too much of this, is that when people leave a community, they don't commit themselves to another life-giving church, they tend to, over time, eventually begin to lessen their convictions, water down their faith, and even possibly stop following Jesus entirely. It's the beginning of deconstruction. Again, talked about that previously. I'm so unbelievably committed to helping people commit themselves to community, not because we're trying to grow a big church, because the devil's not afraid of a big church. I mean, there's story after story in the scripture where God whittles large communities of people down to just a few committed few. What the devil's really concerned with, what the enemy is most intrigued on trying to stop, is a unified church, a committed church that says, no, I'm committed to the people around me. What you and I need more than anything else as it relates to growing in a long obedience in the same direction. Spiritual disciplines are great, but they probably will not stick unless we have companions in the long obedience of following Jesus. And not just when it's convenient. That's what we need endurance for. That even when it's inconvenient, we stay committed. I thank God for the companions that I have in my life. They've given me significant endurance, even when it's been inconvenient. In fact, we've talked about this before, and you're familiar with kind of this concept, but we do this, whether it relates to church or, again, if you're not a Jesus follower, this applies in every area of our lives. That was you. You did that, DJ. Anyway, I love our production team, by the way, just so you know. Okay, but we go from every new thing that we jump into, we're really excited about. Oh, this is like the best thing ever. Like it kind of makes like the hair stand up on my back. Like when people say, this is the best church I've ever experienced. You're like, well, just give it time. I'm going to disappoint you. Give it time. Someone's going to offend you. Give it time. There'll be a decision that's made that you do not understand. Give it time. There's something that we do or give to or something that you'd be like, I don't agree with that. Just give it time. Like everybody's going to disappoint you. And after our initial phase of excitement, and it might be a month, it might be a year, it might be 3 years, we become disillusioned. And usually what happens when we become disillusioned is that most of us find something new to become excited about, and we just repeat that cycle over and over and over again. We do it in our workplace. We do it in our friendships. Sometimes we do it in our education. We do this even in our homes with our kids, with our spouse, and we just kind of go on this continual cycle. And the better form is to realize that you're going to eventually be disillusioned. And so just know that up front. It'll help with your endurance. So what do you really need? You need then an adjustment. What's the adjustment? Commitment. Perseverance. Because you'll never experience growth when you live in the state of comfort. Never. You just won't do it. I was sharing with First Service that in Team Rally this morning, as we're praying for the day and we're praying for you, and just every time that we gather together, all of our servant leaders gather, and we just pray. And I said, I looked around the circle, and there was two men in particular who I just thought about their commitment, the commitment that they've made to just stay fully committed to, in this case, just this community. 3.5 years ago, we merged with another church. Some of you are familiar, called North Church. And in that season, two men in particular, Brian Johnson and Steve Snowball, who have both become dear friends of mine. They're both in First Service. They just stayed committed when it was not convenient. I've had conversation with both of them, and both of them would say it wasn't easy. Like, it wasn't easy, but they stayed committed. And as a result, I'm telling you, their companionship in this long obedience in the same direction has no doubt made me a better father. It certainly made me a better pastor. It made me a better husband. It made me a better friend. I thank God for their commitment. They could have easily gone from excitement to disillusionment and just found someplace else to kind of sink in, maybe be excited about, or at the very least just hide and become reclusive in, but they stayed engaged. They stayed committed. And lastly, I'm closing right here. What stands in our way of becoming more like Jesus? We have an unhealthy identity. Our identity, probably more than anything else, shapes our actions. I don't have a ton of time to lean into this today. I'm already a little bit behind time. So we're going to pick more up on this next week. But here's what I'll share about this morning. Our enemy tries to connect our identity to our failure. Because I failed, I'm a failure. But that's not what Jesus says. He never attaches your actions to your identity. In fact, in Matthew chapter 16, there's this interaction between Jesus and his 12 disciples, and Jesus asks them, hey guys, who do y'all say that I am? C.S. Lewis says this is the single most important question that anybody will ever answer in their life. Who is Jesus to you? And they respond, Simon Peter responds, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus says, ding, 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 you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you, watch this. Jesus says, now I say to you, you are Peter, which means rock. His name was Simon, but Jesus is a baller. He's like, man, I'm going to change your name. He's like, Weston, you're not Weston anymore. You're Jordan. God bless you. Don't think too highly of yourself, Jordan. Okay. But he just changes his name. Simon, literally in the Greek, means shifty, kind of flaky. Peter means rock. He gives him a whole new identity. The same thing happens in your life and in my life. The moment when you and I say yes to Jesus and we identify him for who he really is, he gives you a new identity. More on that in the next series in February. But his desire for you and for me is to see ourselves through that new identity. And here's how that begins. This is how we'll close today, and we'll pick up here next week. But here's how that begins. Before you start with do goals, like I'm going to do this, and I'm going to accomplish that, and I'm going to do that. Before you start with do goals, begin with who goals. There's a ton of science behind this. In the scriptures, I've been talking about this for millennia now. Start with who goals. Who do you want to become? Who is it that when people describe you, or who is it that at the end of your life, who is it that you want them to describe? I want to be a godly man. I want to be a godly mom. I want to be clean. I want to be sober. Those are all great who goals. Your identity shapes your actions. In Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, it's a fantastic book. It's dense at times, but if you're interested in a little bit more about this, called The Power of Habit. And he talks about this study that was done, I believe it was by Yale University, and they studied individuals who were trying to quit smoking. And it said that those who, when asked the question, do you want a cigarette, those who responded with, no, I'm trying to quit, were less than half as likely to actually remain not smoke, than those who responded with, no, I'm not a smoker anymore. Because what they were saying is, that was a part of my past, but it's not a part of my present. See, when you know who you are, it changes what you do, and a healthy identity reinforces healthy habits. And then your healthy habits reinforce that healthy identity. It's a cycle, but it begins with understanding, who are you? Who are you trying to become? Who do you want to become? And so today, I want to give ourselves just a little bit of time, because our desire, our prayer is not that we would just simply rush in on a Sunday, listen to kind of a TED Talk type of a moment, and not allow the Spirit of God to really let sink in what He wants us to practice as a result of what we hear. And on your seats today, there was a blank note card. In just a moment, I'm going to just ask if maybe the Spirit of God is challenging you to write down some who goals. And here's what I mean by that. A few months ago, I was challenged in this area, and I just took some time to consider, who do I want to become? And I wrote this down, and I've changed some of the wording of it, and I've gone back and added a few things and combined a couple of them. And so you can certainly, change what you write today, but just consider this for a moment. As I was writing this down, I just share this with you in hopes that it would help. But to the end of my life, here's how I would hope that people would describe me. He loves Jesus. He didn't always get it right. In fact, there were times where I remember he got it wrong. But man, he really tried to love people like Jesus loved people. His best friend is his wife. He never put anybody above his wife. He was passionate about dating his wife and going on vacation with his wife and just, cuddling with his wife and then, other stuff with his wife. And, you know what I'm saying? He loved his wife. He was crazy about his wife. I want my kids to say, Dad loved Mom. He's a great dad. He was a great granddaddy. I'm thinking about my future. Now, no rush for my daughter. She's 14. Don't have kids anytime soon. You got at least 15 more years till you're married, but maybe more than that. Maybe 16. By 30, there you go. I want people to say, I really do. I want people to say that he was a devoted pastor to the church that he loves. He was a strong leader and he helped people reach their potential. He was generous and found joy in secretly giving. He's disciplined in his faith, intentionally loved people. He reverenced God with a childlike wonder. He's driven towards justice and a better future, but he's content and has a non-anxious present in the present. He's a wise steward of his health. I know nobody would probably say that, but I wanted to kind of felt like he was a wise steward of his health, time, energy, resources entrusted to him. He was rich in friendship, in relationship. He relentlessly pointed people to Jesus. He taught biblical truth, but with deep humility, apologized when he got it wrong, and he left one heck of a legacy. One heck of a legacy. I want people to say, man, he left a rich legacy, just in his character and integrity. And there's some habits that have come as a result of understanding, who do I want to become? He loves Jesus. A habit is that I create and carve out time. You won't find me going to bed too late on just about any night. Even New Year's Eve, I'm watching the game. It's 12:02. If they missed his field goal, I'm going to be furious because you kept me up 2 hours past my bedtime. My kids are always you don't want to watch the ball drop? I'm ball drop? Who cares? I'm I want to get up early so I can just spend some time just undistracted, nobody else. Because I want to love Jesus. I want to lean into and really spend some time with the Lord. My best friend is my wife. I take her out on a weekly date. Once a week. Our kids are at that age now. It's easier. Not everybody can do that yet. But so there's some habits attached to that identity. But I want to offer to you this morning just a moment to respond. We always spend time at the end of every service doing this. But today, maybe your potential response would be to take that blank note card and write some things down, who do I want to become? And that you could just take the next 3 minutes and consider, who do I want to become? And maybe put that in a space or a place where you see it regularly. You can change a few things over time. You can add or exchange some stuff. And then we lean into our identity. Our identity shapes our behavior. It shapes our action. Maybe today, during our time of response, you would consider, hey, what is the Lord leading me to fast over the next 21 days? So I can lean into and spend some more time in prayer. with him and just spend some more time praying through our prayer prompts. Maybe today you'd want to receive communion. Again, we have our tables down front here and in the back corner over there. You can grab some communion elements, receive communion with your spouse or with your friends. Just an opportunity to say, Jesus, I want to make you the focal point of my year. I'm going to receive communion simply as a reminder of your sacrifice towards me. Again, there's blank note cards even on the table over here. If you have a prayer, you're praying for somebody, you'd like us to agree with you in prayer for that individual, fill that out on that card, drop it in the bucket, and we'll pray for them throughout the week. Our prayer team will be down front on this side of the platform as well. If you need prayer for anything, come on down front. We'd love to pray with you this morning as well. But go ahead and close your eyes for just a moment, bow your head, and just consider today asking the Spirit of God. Just simply say underneath your breath, Holy Spirit, what do you want me to do with what I just heard? And just wait for kind of that prompting or that impression of what the Lord would kind of say to you. Maybe there's already something you know. There's something that was been stirred within you today, and instantly you're like, yeah, I want to do that. Okay, well, that's the Lord. Like, lean into that right now. And just take some time to simply respond. Even if you're newer to faith, you're not sure you believe about God, it's okay. I actually bet that he would speak to you right now as well. Just take a minute. Holy Spirit, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to respond?